All right, so the audience is slowly joining us, and we'll just let everybody know that we'll be starting in about a minute and a half.
Do people register for the webinar such that you know how many people will be attending?
Yeah, I checked it a few days ago, and there were like 120 or so.
Okay.
That's really cool.
All right, it's 8:02, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. Good morning, and welcome to another episode of the Arizona Capital Times Morning Scoop. I'm Gary Grotto, the executive editor of the Arizona Capital Times, and I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about transitioning to clean energy in Arizona. And I'd like to start this program by thanking our sponsor for today, Western Resource Advocates. They're a 501c3 based in Boulder, Colorado, that fights climate change and its impact to sustain the environment, economy, and people of the West. And with us is Alex Root here. He's the Arizona Clean Energy Manager for Western Resources Advocates. So, Alex, can you tell us a little bit about Western Resource Advocates and why we're here today, and also tell us a little bit about yourself and your expertise?
Sure, thanks, Gary. So Western Resource Advocates, or WRA, as you said, is a regional nonprofit organization fighting climate change and its impacts to sustain the environment, economy, and people of the West. WRA develops and implements policies to reduce the environmental impacts of the electric power industry in the region. So that's just a little bit about us. We work in 7 states in the Intermountain West, and we have offices in 5 of those states. I'm here in Arizona, live and work here in Arizona. And a little bit about my background. Like you said, I'm the Arizona Clean Energy Manager. I'm also a senior policy advisor here at WRA. My background is in electrical engineering. I have my PhD and my master's both in electrical engineering, focusing on electric power systems. And so the reason that we kind of brought everybody in today is recently there was a study that was released by the Colorado Energy Office that was commissioned by the office and completed by a company called Ascend Analytics that had some really interesting results in the way that you can cut carbon dioxide emissions out of the energy sector in Colorado. And so we looked at that, and I can get into a little bit more detail of some of those things that made it interesting. But WRA saw that report and we thought, hey, this is a really great idea, and we want to see if we can do something similar in Arizona. So I can talk about that a little bit more as we get into it. But
all right, so thank you, Alex. Now I'd like to introduce the rest of the panel, and as I call your name, if you could just please tell us a little bit about yourself, your area of expertise, and what you hope the audience gains from this discussion today. So let's start with Maren Mahoney. Maren is the director of the Arizona Governor's Office of Resiliency and much more, but I'll let her tell you about that.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Gary. Good morning, everybody, and thanks again for joining all of us here. A little bit about myself. I am an attorney with experience in litigation. I also have a master's degree in sustainability from Arizona State University. I have my career has really mostly been focused on clean energy and utility regulation, but I also have some background in land use and water policy. And so I've been in this position as director of the Office of Resiliency under Governor Hobbs for a little over a year. When I stepped into this role, there really wasn't precedence for this office So I've been building it as we go. Luckily, we are in the middle of an unprecedented federal investment opportunity, and so that has really been the catalyst for this office. I can speak a little bit later, a little bit more about the Office of Resiliency, but just briefly, we're very much focused on making a direct difference in Arizonans' lives through growing a clean energy economy, protecting and securing water resources, increasing access to clean transportation, and growing access to outdoor recreation, and improving the health of our forests and grasslands. And we have been I've brought on policy advisors who are providing analysis and recommendations to the governor in these areas, as well as grant management and compliance staff, and a community engagement coordinator who's helping us roll out some of these really big clean energy programs. We're also doing significant cross-sector planning to realize the governor's vision of a resilient Arizona. We are so focused on bringing in these federal funds that as a result, within our 14-month existence, we are looking at administering over $250 million for Arizonans' benefits.
All right. Well, thank you, Maren. And next we have Steve Zylstra. He's the president and CEO of Arizona Technology Council. So, Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself and Arizona Technology Council and what you hope the audience gains from today.
Thank you, Gary, and welcome everyone. It's good to be here. First, I am an engineer like Alex. I spent 20 some years in aerospace and defense, early on as an engineer and then an executive. But I've been running tech councils now for 22 years, the one in Pittsburgh and the one here in Arizona. And the Tech Council is a trade association business model, also a not-for-profit. We have a statewide reach. We have offices in Phoenix and Tucson. We have over 750 member companies. All the brand name tech companies that you know about are members of the Tech Council. We do policy, we do programs and events, we do reports, we save our members money. And so full-fledged comprehensive trade association business model. We have been working on energy policy for maybe a decade now, and policy's been in my background since probably the mid-'80s. And the reason is because a lot of our members are demanding clean energy, that all of their energy come from clean sources. And of course, we have many member companies that are in the industry, photovoltaics, solar, batteries, as well as EVs. So now we represent their interests as well.
All right, thank you, Steve. And our last panelist is Nick Shivka. He's the Senior Manager of Sustainability Initiatives with Local First Arizona. Nick, the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks, Gary. Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Shipka. I am the Senior Manager of Sustainability Initiatives at Local First Arizona. We are a statewide business coalition. We probably have over 3,000 members, but we work with every single small business incorporated in the state of Arizona. We've been around for 20 years. I think a lot of the work that's leading up to now and thinking about carbon emissions and energy reductions is hitting small businesses really hard. Small businesses often don't have the resources or capacity to be able to decarbonize, but there are a lot of opportunities coming down the pipeline, potentially with the Inflation Reduction Act and all the work that the governor's office is doing. So really excited to be here because I've been working with small businesses on projects to help them save money while saving the planet at the same time. I've owned a coffee company in Phoenix. I've owned a couple of small businesses. I have a Master of Sustainability Solutions from ASU. And I have kind of a grab bag of work experience, but a lot of it has been in business development and working in the food sector, especially. So distribution, farming, food processing. And it's giving me a look at kind of all the different business operations that a small business might have to navigate. So really excited to talk to everybody here on this panel. I think this is a really interesting group to be brought together to talk about this. And yeah, I'm excited.
All right, thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
So before we start talking, I'd like to remind the audience that we have our chat open. It's available to ask the panelists questions. And I ask that you use it only for questions, and please don't use it to talk amongst yourselves or make incendiary comments or anything like that. So with that, let's get started. Alex, let's start with you. So Western Resource Advocates, you guys are finalizing a study on Arizona, related to Arizona, and can you talk a little bit about that and why you commissioned it and what it's going to, what some of the preliminary findings are?
Sure. Thanks, Gary. As I said before in my introduction, the study that we're talking about is being done by a company called Ascend Analytics, and they are energy modelers. And the original study that kind of got us interested in this was commissioned by the Colorado Energy Office. There's some really interesting results that came out of that. The report kind of concluded that Colorado can get to pretty significant emission reductions, like up to 97.7% carbon dioxide emission reductions without any like major changes in policy, without using any new technologies that are unproven like carbon capture and storage or hydrogen, and really showed a pathway to decarbonization. Arizona is pretty different than Colorado, and so we wanted to make sure that some of the lessons could carry over to Arizona. And so WRA did commission these same energy modelers at Ascend Analytics to do a similar study for Arizona. We used as much recent data as we could. We both Arizona Public Service and Tucson Electric Power have both filed integrated resource plans recently, and so we used the data from those integrated resource plans. Salt River Project recently released an integrated system plan, which is very similar to an integrated resource plan, and we used data from that, as well as publicly available data from EIA and some other sources. But unlike Colorado, Arizona does not have interim goals for greenhouse gas emission reductions. And so we wanted to see how that kind of played out, to see if it's possible and how feasible it is for Arizona to get to net zero carbon dioxide emissions by 2050. And we're pretty far through that. We were hoping to have that report today. But unfortunately, Ascend is still finalizing some of those results. So we don't have them to share with you today, but we'll probably be releasing those over the next couple of weeks.
I can't hear you, Gary.
Yeah,
I don't know
sorry.
if anyone else can.
Gary, you're on mute.
Or no audio is coming out, rather.
Yeah, sorry, we can't hear you.
I'm on mute.
There
Oh,
you
Now we
go.
can hear you.
there we go. You're good.
And I apologize for the difficulty here. I just disconnected my device and
You're back online.
You're back.
all right, can you hear me yet?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, and I can hear everybody just fine. So sorry for that. All right, so is there what is there from the Colorado study that you can apply to Arizona?
I think just some of the practices and how the modeling is being done and moving the types of data collection that have been taking place and some of the considerations. Like I said, there Colorado showed that they could do it without some newer technologies like carbon capture and storage or hydrogen, but they did some substantial research on some of those newer resources to make sure that cost assumptions and things like that were modeled correctly, so that they could be selected if the model needs to. And so they did that, and then just a bunch of experience from having done this before that they carried over to this project. So we like I said, we're looking forward to those results.
And you
Alex,
mentioned you
Alex,
mentioned oh, go ahead. Steve?
I was just going to say, Alex, is the idea then to try and bring some of those best practices here to Arizona?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, Arizona is not the same as Colorado, which is why we're commissioning this study or have commissioned this study. Colorado has significant load in the wintertime, and Arizona tends to be a summer peaking system. So we have a lot of air conditioning here because, as we know, what happened last summer with all those days over 110, it's just the load shapes and the way that the system needs to operate is pretty different. And so there were some lessons that we could learn from modeling Colorado, but it's important to look at Arizona directly to make sure that the lessons that we're getting from the study are carrying over, and we can show that they apply to Arizona.
Thank you.
And you mentioned some practices. I mean, can you tell us what some of those are?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, Steve or Gary?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Now you mentioned you from the Colorado study, you got some practices, some ideas about practices that could carry over to Arizona. And what are some of those?
I mean, I think the big thing that we have seen in some of the preliminary results that we've gotten that are similar to Colorado is that, I mean, the cheapest resources that are on the system are wind and solar. And while Colorado is going to have some more wind in their system and a little bit less solar, Arizona, because we're in the desert, because it's so sunny here, we're gonna have a lot more solar. But I think those, just looking at prices and the what we're seeing in the industry, I think we knew going into it that renewable energy was going to be a big part of the build out, and just kind of tweaking those numbers and figuring out how much of each resource and how they kind of come together to make sure that not only have we reduced carbon dioxide emissions, but that the system maintains reliability and is still affordable, so people can continue to afford to pay their electric bills each month.
And Mary, you talked a little bit about your office, and of course, it's basically brand new office, right? And so, what are you doing to, help in this pathway to alternative energy?
Yeah, so the Office of Resiliency, like you said, was established just a little over a year ago. Governor Hobbs announced us in her inaugural State of the State. And so ever since then, we've hit the ground running. We have hired, we have about 10 people on staff. We are the state energy office as well. Like I mentioned, we cover land use, water, and transportation in addition to energy. But so our office is broader than just an energy office, but we function as a state energy office, which is funded by the federal government since the 1970s. The state energy offices are established in every state across the country, including our territories. And we get an annual appropriation every single year. Under previous administrations, there had been a fairly robust state energy office, but then under the more immediate predecessor, it was subsumed into the Department of Administration. And so that was used in a different, they took a different pathway with that funding. But recognizing that there's this incredible federal funding opportunity right now, billions of dollars to bring into Arizona, and then that can be used to then also bring in private investments and philanthropic investments, and then that just having that multiplier effect. That's why that's one of the remits that we have in the Office of Resiliency. So, as the state energy office, we are bringing on a number of grants. I think I might have mentioned, we've been selected to administer over $250 million. And that required us to develop coalitions and submit grant proposals in this past year. And so we've really been doing a lot of that right now. That's where our focus is, because we also understand that this federal investment is it's going to end likely at some point. And so we want to make sure that we capture as much of it as possible for Arizonans. We have a couple of major awards that were provided or were announced recently. So we, as a state energy office, we developed a coalition to go after a competitive grant from the EPA called Solar for All. And recently, it was the end of April, it was announced that Arizona was, my office was selected to administer $156 million for solar for Arizonans. I would be remiss to not mention there are other awardees in the state of Arizona. The Hopi Utilities Corporation got $25 million, and Grid Alternatives, which is a nonprofit that serves tribes in several states, including Arizona, was selected to administer over $62 million. So these funds are going to go towards populations that are not being served by the market currently. So under our proposal, and let me step back for a second. We have just been announced as the selectee. Now we need to go into negotiations with the EPA as to what the actual program will look like. And so what I'm going to describe is about our proposal. It's not necessarily the finished or the final program, because we need to come to those decisions with EPA. But our proposal established 3 buckets essentially for solar, to get solar and solar benefits to Arizonans. So one of the buckets would be working with mission-based lenders like CDFIs to provide low-interest loans for moderate income borrowers in distressed areas. And this is we're really focused on rural Arizona for that program. And then another program would be a neighborhood solar program that would be in partnership with any interested tribal utility authorities, rural electric cooperatives, or any utilities in the state of Arizona to provide neighborhood scale solar to low income renters, because renters are not currently reached due to policy choices that have been made in the state of Arizona. And then a third program is green mortgages that would be available through partnerships with housing finance authorities. So we're, a big part of our office's work is done through partnerships and building those relationships. So that's Solar for All. We are hoping to get those programs up and running through by the end of the year. But again, there's someone, that's a tentative date. Some of the benefits of Solar for All is we know that working class families on average spend about $1,400 on electricity every year. And then so for the participants in our Solar for All program, they will save a minimum of 20% on their bill compared to the average household in their region. So we estimate that this program will result in cumulative savings for Arizonans over the course of the program of about $164 million. This is a workforce and a clean air win. So that will be 61 megawatts of solar. I think, Steve, you had mentioned we currently have, can you remind me how many megawatts we have right now installed in the state of Arizona? I think you're on.
Sorry, I was on mute. 6.73 megawatts across Arizona.
Yes, so this is 61 megawatts. So this will exponentially increase the amount of solar in our state.
Can you just explain, what 1 megawatt, the capacity of 1 megawatt, how many houses, how many households, give us some perspective.
Yeah, can I lean on one of the electrical engineers in the discussion for that one? That it's not quite, so let's see, a gas plant is going to be thousands of megawatts, right? Where in fact, and there, not only that, but there's, let's see, we're about, I think there's some major renewable energy solar projects too that are hundreds of megawatts, and those serve, oh boy, Alex, could you help me out?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I think it's somewhere around 400 homes can be powered by a megawatt of capacity. That I don't know
It,
the
it's 1,000. Thousand's a good rough number per megawatt.
So, all right, we'll go with that. And sorry to throw a curveball at you there.
No,
I
that's
was,
okay. It's very helpful because I'm always in these conversations with, people in the energy world. And so it's like you kind of take it for granted and I'm like, oh, I haven't thought about that for a while. So I appreciate that question.
so, um, Nick, you were talking about small business earlier. When we spoke a few days ago, um, I asked you, so your organization, uh, how do you help a small business to, I forget exactly what you said, save money and save the planet?
Yes. So we at Local First Arizona, we really try to break down barriers that small businesses have to be able to reach their goals. I think that's probably describes our work in a nutshell. Even though our work is really broad, we work across the state in rural communities and farms. I think in a nutshell, we break down barriers. So something that we've been able to do is create a strategy where we're able to engage with small businesses, which is really tough because, and this matters a lot for decarbonization too, right? Because 97% of all the businesses in Arizona, all of them, have 20 employees or fewer. So those 97%, that's 600,000 businesses in Arizona that have 20 employees or fewer, and that's employing over 40% of Arizona's workforce. So this is a significant group, right? But it's also how do you reach out to all of these businesses to be able to approach them and say, hey, I see that you're probably paying a lot of money for energy. You're renting a space. You don't have a lot of abilities to be able to make changes in your building to lower your energy or carbon costs. So what are the resources available to you? So we will work with them through our programs to help them develop a project that will help them reduce their energy by 20% or more and help them save money. What we really try to do is help them to finance these projects too, because as a small business, if you need to do a project, if you need to install a new air conditioner or you want to get some insulation done on your building to save some energy and reinvest that back into your small business, it's probably going to cost you, anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 or more, but that's not, no bank is going to lend you that money, one, and a small business won't just have $30,000 lying around to throw at that. So small businesses are kind of left in a lurch. And I think with the Inflation Reduction Act too, this is probably the single most impactful investment that the federal government is making on climate. And we do need to take advantage of that. But small businesses get lost in that conversations. And that's hotels, that's auto garages, plumbers, your HVAC technicians, pool companies, farms, etc. 50% of all the customers across the state being commercial. So, with the Inflation Reduction Act, we try to connect them to the tax credits and deductions that are in the Inflation Reduction Act. And so we can say, yes, if you make this change, so if you improve the energy efficiency in your business by 25%, that entitles you to a 20% tax credit through the IRA. Great, that's great. But again, the business still has to have the upfront capital to be able to invest in that. So, and some businesses don't have the tax liability to be able to take advantage of the credits and deductions that are laid out in the Inflation Reduction Act. So while there is a lot of money available, it's usually going to go to the larger corporations that can invest millions or billions of dollars into a project because they have that upfront capital. Now, something that would help businesses that has been helping residents is something akin to HERA, which is the Home Energy Electrification Rebate something. I'm not sure. You have to check me on that. Maren might know. Maren, do you know what the acronym stands for?
Okay, give me 1 second. I do have it written down here, and it changes all the time.
Yeah, it
We're
changes
going
day to
with
day,
it
right?
right off. From my office, we're just calling them the home energy rebate program, and they're
Yes.
actually two separate programs. But for the purposes of this discussion, I think that's sufficient.
Yes. So a resident can get up to $14,000 in point of sale rebates, meaning that they can work with their utility to replace their air conditioner on their home. The money from you can get $4,000 back, I think, on qualified heat pumps and $4,000 back on a qualified electrical box. So you are significantly lowering the barriers for people who are middle to low income to be able to make these changes that will save them hundreds to thousands of dollars a year on their energy. Now, imagine if we could offer that to small businesses, but they don't have that. So I'm really trying to advocate for something more akin to a rebate program for small businesses, because if that existed, then that makes our job easier in helping small businesses to decarbonize. And if small businesses can decarbonize and lower their costs, that is good for the health of our communities. Money spent on small businesses is circulates in our local communities for more than twice as long as when we spend that at a larger corporation or a chain retailer. When we think about the small businesses that benefit our community, that do charity, they pay taxes in our community. This is money well spent. So kind of a roundabout way, Gary, of answering your question of how we help small businesses. We connect them to all of the resources that are possibly available out there so that they can get projects done, so they can lower their energy bills and decarbonize, because higher energy bills are coming. But if we can help them to lower their bills now, then they'll be able to invest more of that money in being able to stay in business and to grow their small business, which we know is good for the health of the community.
Now you mentioned the tax credit, but most small businesses don't have that upfront capital to make that, buy that air conditioner or whatever. Um, Now, are there programs out there or things they can do to, get that money for that air conditioner so they can claim that credit?
There's a couple things.
Besides a bank.
Short answer, no. So what we can do is help them to develop capacity to plan out a project. So we have something called the Green Business Boot Camp at Local First Arizona. And that allows a small business owner or a manager of a business to go through our program and basically learn how they can do this project. So because there isn't really other funding available out there for a small business to be able to do this, we can help them at least on the front end to plan the project. Small businesses and small business owners are wearing 1,000 different hats. They don't have time. And essentially, even though it could be really important for their business to be able to plan, something forward seeking, like an energy efficiency project. So we kind of become their sustainability team in their back pocket to help them plan this project, give them the capacity to know how to plan a project and to know that the return on investment is going to be such so that they'll be able to pay it off in 2 or 3 years. There are some small utility rebates available to help take the sting off, but again, you have to work in Arizona, you have to work with the utility and their contractors to kind of pave a path to be able to get those rebates. If a business owner were to say, hey, I know I need to change out all of my lights for LEDs, I know that's a good thing and I'll save energy. If they do that before okaying it with the utility or are unaware, it's really hard to backtrack and go and claim those incentives. So again, there's a ton of barriers for small businesses to be able to chip away at all at being able to make these investments, which are good, for the whole state and for the whole country.
And can I pile on to that, Gary, a little bit?
Sure.
I think Nick made a whole bunch of really good points there, and I think just want to emphasize some of the things that Nick said, and there's an adage in the energy industry that's been around for a long time that like the cheapest kilowatt hour to generate is the one that you don't have to generate, and so by having energy efficiency in the system, it reduces the amount of energy that we need in order to do the same job. So Nick had a really great example of lighting, changing from an incandescent bulb to an LED bulb. You can still do the same things that you were doing before, but you use a whole lot less energy. And so that's really great for small business owners and households because you're saving on your energy bill. But in addition to that, the additional piece of it that a lot of people don't realize or don't notice is that by reducing your energy consumption, it prevents the utility from needing to build additional generation. And by not needing that new peaker plant or new power plant that needs to be online during peak hours in the afternoon, you're not only saving yourself money, you're saving all ratepayers money because all ratepayers are not having to pay for that new power plant. So energy efficiency doesn't sound like the most exciting thing. It's kind of boring, like, oh, I'm just like replacing some light bulbs, but it's a big deal and it's really important. And I think it's also important to recognize that utilities make money by spending money. Utilities make money when they buy a new power plant or build a new power plant. They get to pass that cost on to ratepayers, and then they get a percentage on top of that of earnings, and that's how they get to make money. And so when you install energy efficiency in your home, you prevent them from building that new power plant. And so they're not then making money on that new power plant. So they are disincentivized to have people put energy efficiency in their homes. And so the types of programs that Nick is talking about, and I've seen Marin is putting some stuff in here about the Arizona Corporation Commission. They have energy efficiency rules through the Arizona Corporation Commission. Those things are really important for ratepayers, not just the people getting the energy efficiency in their home or in their small business, but for all ratepayers across the board. It is the cheapest way to have new energy on the system.
Real quick, I just want to go back and just tie one thing up, Gary, that you had asked me about funding available for small businesses.
Mm.
Now, because we've recognized that there is this gap and we know the importance, as Alex pointed out, we know the importance of helping small businesses and kind of like a decentralized, like everybody being able to become more energy efficient. Because there's a gap in funding available for small businesses, we've been able to work with Growth Partners AZ to offer a 3-year $25,000 loan at 3%. It's called the Green Loan Fund. It's character-based, so it's not a hard credit check against the business, but it's designed specifically to give businesses that upfront gap financing to make these changes, to invest in insulation, to invest in air conditioning, to invest in LEDs now, so they can start to see those savings and then pay back a loan that is character-based and pay it back from their savings that they're receiving on their energy bill. So that's one thing we've been able to do, but that's something as an organization we can do because we have strong partnerships with these local banks. But is it enough for widespread uptake of this? Maybe. I mean, we could do that throughout the state, but I think our time would be better spent if there were more rebates and incentives available that were accessible for small businesses.
All right,
And I
Nick,
just want to add real quick, Gary. Sorry, I was talking about utilities and how utilities make money. And just to be fair, I'm talking about investor-owned utilities when I say that. Co-op utilities or public power utilities like Salt River Project make money in a different way. They're nonprofit generating, so they do have different incentives. So just want to make sure I wasn't confusing with the different types of utilities.
All right, thanks for that. So Nick's our small business guy. Steve, you're our, big business guy here. Sorry for leaving you stranded there for so long here in this conversation, but I understand that the Tech Council is working with the Office of Resiliency. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on there?
Yeah, well, let me first say that 85% of our members are small businesses. So
Okay.
while all the big brands are members of the Arizona Tech Council, we definitely serve small businesses, sort of startup to multinational. But let me start with some, yes, we've been working with Marin, I think, since the day she took the job, and it's been a very good collaborative relationship. But let me set the stage a little bit, particularly seeing some of the questions we've seen in the chat. The IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, is investing $369 billion in clean energy and e-mobility. That's a generational or maybe a multi-generational investment, the largest of its kind ever in clean energy. But as Marin pointed out in the chat, it pales in comparison to the amount of subsidy that the fossil fuel industry gets today and has gotten for as long as any of us can remember. So this is really to address the issues that the fossil fuel industry has created with all the carbon we're generating in our environment. And so far, Arizona has benefited from the IRA to the tune of $10.57 billion has come into Arizona, and that has created 14,100 jobs. And by the way, the preponderance of those jobs are in rural communities and communities of need. So we're the best in the nation as far as that's concerned, and that is one of the incentives that the Biden administration has provided in the IRA to do more on tribal lands and in rural communities, and Arizona is doing just that. I represent a lot of the companies that are in this business: Lucid Motors, Nikola, Core Power, American Battery, to name a few. And well, some of them are getting funding from the federal government. All of them are making massive investments of their own or their own shareholders' funds into clean energy. The $15.5 billion investment that LG is making in Queen Creek to build both two battery factories, one for storage and one for transportation, are their funds. Now, the federal government is going to be investing alongside these major corporations to facilitate this. Other examples of this private-public partnership are in the CHIPS Act, right? Well, TSMC is investing $65 billion in North Phoenix, and they got 6.5 billion, 6.6 billion from the CHIPS Act. Same thing with Intel, $20 billion investment by them, and they got $8.5 billion from the CHIPS Act. So all of these investments are investments that are being made alongside the private sector. The private sector has a huge stake in the success of all of these technologies. And we've got some very cool technologies here in Arizona. Nikola, as you may know, builds Class 8 trucks. These are over-the-road semi-trucks, and they make an all-electric truck. Gets about 320 miles of range. And they make a hydrogen electric truck, which provides a lot of additional range, 500 to 900 mile range, depending on the load. So, and they're putting in mobile hydrogen refueling stations at truck stops around America to refuel these hydrogen fuel cells. And that's an investment they're making again. So the private sector sees the demand, sees the future for clean energy in America, and are making huge investments alongside the federal government. And, solar is coming back to Arizona. You may recall back in the 90s, we had a lot of solar manufacturers. Then because of tariffs and other things, they went away. But photovoltaic manufacturers are also coming back to Arizona. JA Solar out in Tolleson is an example of that. So we have a very, very robust clean energy economy growing here in Arizona. So much so that at the Arizona Tech Council, we do a clean energy, an e-mobility and clean energy conference once a year. We have a e-mobility and clean energy committee that meets on a monthly basis because there's a growing number of these kinds of companies that are locating here in Arizona to address this issue and to get us ultimately to zero carbon. Maren and I have worked together, as I said, since she took the job. We provide input to the work that she's doing. We help promote to our members the opportunities that are being generated out of the Office of Resiliency. It's a good private-public partnership, government working together with the private sector to assure that the state of Arizona takes maximum use and maximum advantage of the federal investment that's being made. It's really up to us, and in many cases up to Maren's office, to go after these funding opportunities to address the clean energy need here in Arizona. And Solar for All is another great opportunity that she referred to that's only recently come our way. And I'm excited about all the other prospects that the IRA will bring to us. And by the way, IRA is 10 years of funding. So it's over a decade that these investments will be made. So they're not going away anytime soon. Again, they're being made alongside private sector investment.
So the other day in our prep call, you talked about headwinds. Can you talk a little bit about that? What are the headwinds, Steve?
Yeah, well, there are many. I even mentioned in chat the ACC, the Arizona Corporation Commission, has created headwinds for solar energy, especially now putting an additional tax or hoping to put an additional tax on solar for people who already have installed solar. There's a sort of anti-solar climate amongst the majority of the members on the ACC. So it's really put up a significant barrier. We see it at the state legislature as well. We see all kinds of anti-solar bills. Fortunately, we've been either able to knock them down in the process or they've gotten vetoed by the governor. You may not know, but there were anti-ESG bills the last two sessions, essentially to outlaw ESG. And I'm not sure how we would do that, but of course, neither of those have come to fruition. There's other headwinds that we're facing as a country and as a community that affect all this, that make people reticent to make these kinds of investments. We've got two wars going on. We've got a contentious election underway. All of these things make people more conservative in their actions. And so these all create headwinds. There are still technological hurdles to overcome, although technology's been expanding in this sector almost exponentially. As indicated earlier, solar power is now one of the cheapest forms of generating power, period, right? And so, I'm very positive about the future. I think we've got good people working at the state government, putting their shoulder behind this. I think we have a private sector that's extraordinarily active right now in these areas. We have a lot of data centers in Arizona. Data centers are the #1 power hog, period. but I can tell you a lot of my members that run data centers have stakes in the ground in this decade when they will be at zero carbon. So industry is responding. If you look at advanced manufacturers like TSMC and Intel, also stakes in the ground when they'll be at zero carbon and also zero water consumption. In fact, Intel has a goal to be positive water. They're going to produce more water than they consume. So in a lot of that, some of these companies are good corporate citizens. They're doing it for all the right reasons. Others are doing it because there's pressure on them from their shareholders and their employees. The employees of these large tech companies tend to be youthful, and they worry about their future, what climate change is going to bring to their future, and they're beginning to see it every day on television. So they care. I shouldn't say television. They're probably seeing it on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, but they realize what's going on, and they're pressuring their employers to do more around reducing carbon through clean energy and other ways. So I'm in spite of all the headwinds, I'm very optimistic that Arizona is moving in the right direction.
And I'll add to that. I think when we look at integrated resource plans or the integrated system plan from Salt River Project, utilities are building solar, and the utilities have plans to build a lot of solar. And so, like Steve and Maren were talking at the beginning about some numbers and how much solar is coming from the Solar for All grant. But and I don't know the numbers for APS and TEP off the top of my head. SRP's numbers are easy to remember because they're round numbers, but like SRP has a goal to have 2,025 megawatts of solar on their system by 2025. That's less than a year from now. They have, by the end of their study period, their ISP was a 15-year study period. And by the end of that study period, they're saying they're going to have an additional 6,000 megawatts of solar on their system. Those are big numbers. And APS's goals are not in specific megawatts, but APS is saying by 2035 that they'll generate 45% of their megawatts from renewable resources and 65% of their resources from clean resources, and clean includes nuclear in that because they have Palo Verde. So I mean, this is something that's happening. We are watching this transition happen, and while it needs to be accelerated, it needs to be happening faster to be in line with climate science. It's happening. And so we need to make sure that we're doing this stuff in a smart way. And I think Steve touched on a lot of good points, how this can benefit the Arizona economy, how it creates jobs and brings tax revenue to a lot of these communities. And so I think it's important to recognize that the utilities are seeing this as well, the big utilities in Arizona.
By the way, I should have mentioned one other headwind is transformers. So there's a global increased demand for transformers, and unfortunately, a lot of them are manufactured in China. And so, building out new solar capability requires transformers, and the supply chain issues have been another headwind for that. And by the way, just another corporate example, TSMC is making this massive investment, right? $65 billion. They put 14.5 megawatts of installed solar just in their parking lot on top of every parking space. And they buy renewable energy credits to cover all of their power. So this is the sensitivity that large corporations are beginning to have to the importance of clean energy.
Gary, can I just jump in really quick? There's to talk about the transmission. This is an issue across the West in particular, and this is regardless of whatever energy generation happens. The utilities are projecting an enormous increase in demand. There's I think 40%, give or take. I'm sorry if you've already covered this, but I've been active in the chat. So But that means that we've got to do a lot of building. And that means, like Steve just said, there are some, concerns about that building, because there are headwinds in the form of the supply chain, but also land use and permitting. But we are tackling we are tackling some of those issues in the form of an innovation. The federal government just started a grid enhancement technology working group, which my office is a part of. We're also bringing on a grid resilience fellow through the Department of Energy. And we are going to be, working to develop, ways for the utilities to, they're new. So we're working to partner with the utilities to implement these new technologies, which are proven. They're not so new that they're, that there's a risk there, but they are incredibly less costly than brand new transmission lines. And they're technologies that you can do to, upgrade the wiring. And I am not a technology person, so I'm sure I simplified that, too much, but essentially it will greatly increase the capacity on transmission lines while making them more reliable, and it will cost less money. So these are things that there are technologies out there that we can do, and we can invest in our current transmission lines. That said, we still do have headwinds in terms of, we still do need to build out those transmission lines as well as investing in these new technologies. So I just wanted to throw that in there, Steve.
By the way, a lot of critics of solar energy often talk about the importance of the reliability of the grid and the cost of power. We've already stated that solar power is much cheaper now than any other form of power generation. And Arizona was just awarded the top prize for having the most reliable grid in America. So we're in the best possible position to move forward on clean energy, because we have already low cost power, medium cost power here in Arizona because of our nuclear power plant, right? About a third of the power is generated from nuclear. So the costs are relatively low. Solar power is even less costly, and we have an extraordinarily reliable grid. So there's no state that's in a better position to move forward than we are.
And just to tack on to that, something for Steve and what Maren was saying is something that we haven't talked about related to reliability and cost and also transmission is energy markets are like a huge thing happening in Arizona. Probably one of the biggest factors that can influence the future of the Arizona grid. And I know we're short on time here, so going into detail is going to be difficult, but there are tons of efficiency gains that can be garnered from markets. And the utilities are currently looking into day-ahead markets, either through California ISO or through Southwest Power Pool. And so we're eagerly watching that development, but potential for huge impacts to the Arizona grid.
All right, thank you, Alex. So we only got about a minute left, and I just want to thank the audience for tuning in today and taking an hour out of your morning to be with us. I want to give an extra thanks to the panel who took it upon themselves to answer these questions in the chat. That allowed for pretty much all the questions to be answered, and I appreciate that. Thank you. And want to thank Western Resources Advocates and Steve Zylstra, Nick Shifka, Alex Root here, and Maren Mahoney for being here today, and thank the audience. And keep your eyes peeled to your inbox, because we're going to be having some more morning scoops coming up. Details in the emails. So anyway, thank you very much, everybody, and have a good day.
Thanks for having us. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.